Konnichiwa, Samurai James here. We're going to be looking at 7 supplemental samurai armors in this video series. Since this is the first in the video series, let's explain a little bit. What is supplemental armor? Well, what is primary armor? The 6 parts of the primary samurai armor are the kabuto, the helmet, the mempo, the mask, the do, the cuirass, the kote, the armored sleeves, the haidate, the thigh armor, and the sunyate, the shin guards. The rest of this armor fills gaps in that armor, and it's something that you may not see that often. Alright, let's take a hands-on look here. Part 1 of the series is going to be something called the nodawa. This is supplemental throat protection. What this does is it ties around the back of the neck, and it helps to fill the gap in between the do and the tare, which is the piece that hangs underneath the mempo. So I'm going to put this on so that you can see how it sits. And what this does is the mempo would sit over top of this with the tare, and then the do can either sit over top or underneath of it. If you have it underneath, then you have extra layers that are taking impacts from the front to help spread that force by hitting the do and then dissipating force out. However, if you catch a thrust from underneath, it's easier to ride up and come strike you in the throat from on top of the do. So you could wear it under the do for the protection for that, but then you have less percussive resistance. If something hits your do, it's actually going to be pushing this into you rather than spreading out as much over the do. It's not enough to make it a fatal blow in most cases when it wouldn't be. It's simply a level of comfort factor. Now there is a second type of supplemental neck armor, and that is called a guruwa. I do not have one, but it is very similar. Now how does a guruwa differ from a nodawa? Well, it would still have the hanging plates like this, but instead of being this plate that ties around behind the neck, there would be a solid plate here in the front and 2 or more hinged, whether that be by a hinge or simply by lacing, plates that tie around the rest of the neck, and it would fully encompass the neck and provide vertical protection as well. Whereas you can see the nodawa mostly sits flat. It doesn't give me any coverage here. A guruwa would sit up more and have more protection for that. Now, are there other variations of the nodawa and the guruwa? Yes, there are. This one in particular I have with this igawa and lacing because it matches my green harness here. Now, what kind of variations are there? Well, there's lots. One of them, instead of having hanging plates like this, it may be a single bib-like piece, and it may completely be covered in mail, which is called kusari, and have no lacing or steel plates whatsoever. For this particular example, I got it to go along with my green armor, so I have the matching igawa and the matching lacing and chidori and everything else. But there are multiple variations of it historically, and the same holds true with the nodawa. It could have plates that are hanging like this, that are articulated by lacing, that hang freely, or they could be just mail over top of fabric. Now, why would you go with mail over top of fabric rather than plates? Well, cost could be a factor. It is more flexible because this is a steel plate, and while these 3 plates will move individually, they are rigid from side to side, so they're not as flexible as something that is simply all made out of mail. It's a trade-off of mobility versus protection. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's kind of a metal piece here sitting on your neck that wouldn't be overly comfortable, and no, it's not really comfortable to wear directly on your neck. And it certainly wouldn't be for any impact that strikes it and drives it further into your neck. However, when you're wearing your yoroi hidatari, which would have a collar to it, you have a layer of fabric in between the plate and your neck, so that can be more comfortable. It's also possible that you would also have a undershirt as well, so you could have 2 layers of collar, or they may have even worn an extra layer of fabric simply over top to provide additional comfort. Now, why would you not see a nodawa all the time? Well, it's a supplemental piece of armor, so not everybody had it, not everybody could afford it. The ones who could probably had it. Now, you may have seen some suits of armor in pictures and actually not even known that they had a nodawa, because as it's normally worn underneath of here and sometimes under the cuirass, when it's worn, you can hardly see it. And when they're on display, as I've done now, if you're not sure what it is, it can almost look like this is one really big set of plates hanging off of the mempo. But that's actually the nodawa under there. Now, one other reason that I've seen that people say that they may not have worn them is that it affects your mobility, and in my experience with wearing it, I can move my head side to side fine, I can look up and down fine for the most part. The only time that I find any restriction to it is if I'm trying to lean over and look at my feet. It can dig a little bit into the throat here, but it's not anything that I think would be a big deal where I would decide not to wear one on the battlefield if I had the option. I would opt for the extra protection and less mobility, but that's a personal choice that each warrior has to make. Now, if you've enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a subscribe if you haven't already. If not, that's cool. Like and comment. It always helps drive some more traffic, and I appreciate it. This is Samurai James, and thanks for watching, and sayonara.